Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 yo, go, go, go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day.
Hey guys, this is Just One Guy, and I'm back here with another update on Project Hermes. Now, it's been a bit of a setback for me with two major problems. The first major problem is programming on mobile, and it's just one specific problem, which is trying to program this third-person input on mobile. Now, for the most part, Unity is pretty easy to program on mobile. It's the same as when you program on PC. Most of the code, I'd say 99% of it, will work the exact same way you programmed it on PC as it will on mobile. The problem comes in when you're dealing with touches in the way that Unity handles touch. Now, if you don't want to deal with touch input at all, you just want to deal with a mouse cursor, that's fine. Unity will just treat every single touch that a person touches the screen as a mouse input, and it'll be the same as the mouse cursor. This is fine if you're just making simple camera controls where you want to rotate and pan or something like that. Now, if you want to make a third-person controller, what most games will do to get around dealing with touches is just simulate a controller. So they'll have something like this, but instead of having one joystick over here, I don't know if it's showing up too well, it's pretty transparent, but they'll have another one over here for the camera. And so they just won't have to deal with touches at all, because they'll deal with essentially an on-screen controller. The problem comes in if you want to make something like the camera system in Genshin Impact, which has buttons over here, a joypad for moving over here, a joystick over here for moving, and then when you want to move the camera, you could just swipe either left or right, or you can use the pinch zoom gesture to zoom in. That's the system I wanted to go with, because I feel like if you're going to program on mobile, you should take advantage of the device that you're working on. The problem is that's incredibly hard because of the way Unity deals with touches. For one, when the person is touching the screen with multiple fingers, it has trouble differentiating the fingers. It assigns each touch ID, but if a person removes their finger, it switches the ID in a weird system that's not too well explained with the documentation, and it's not intuitive on how exactly it works. So that was giving me a lot of complications developing this particular camera system. So, and to be honest, if I wasn't trying to develop this specific camera system, I probably would have been done with this project by now. But it's taken me months just simply trying to figure out that how to deal with that control, because I'm trying to deal with an on-screen joystick input while dealing with controlling the camera through touches, which Unity really doesn't like, because if you touch the joystick, it'll read it the same as a touch to move the camera, and then if you remove your finger, it won't really differentiate whether you're trying to move the camera or move the joystick. There are ways around it, but each way is just complicated, and it's really unintuitive to deal with and just a coding nightmare. So I'm going to deal with that at the end of my project, and for now, just deal with on-screen controls as their controller. That was the first setback. The second setback was the camera, and I'll just go out and go back in. And this is another thing that's not too intuitive to Unity, and where Unity's documentation is, it doesn't really explain it well. Now, what I wanted to do was make a single camera that rotates like this on the X and Y axis. You can pan the camera. Oh, you can't tell right now because I'm moving the character, but let me escape. You can see I can pan the camera, and one that I can zoom in. And I wanted to make this work on both mobile and Android. Now, I did succeed in some manner, but the complication with this came in the way that Unity handles all this. And one thing that people might not notice is if you modify the rotation of any object, Unity will automatically modify the position of that object. So that makes writing rotation code pretty complicated when you try to rotate, pan, and zoom, because Unity modifies the transform position in very weird ways that you won't really expect. This took me a long time to deal with it, but the way I dealt with it is I just separated each object. So I have one game object for panning, one for zooming, and another one for rotation. And even with that, there were still problems, because another thing that's not really obvious when you, or explained in the documentation, is when you modify the parent object or the child object, it modifies the other one, which is really weird to deal with and not really intuitive to how you would think it would work based on the documentation. So that took me a long time to get working, just because it's not really explained well, the relationship between the rotation and the position of a game object. But generally, if you rotate a game object in any type of way, it will also modify the the position. I think you can even see it in here. Let me see. You can see I'm just rotating this object to circle around. And I wanted it to do a mouse orbit instead of just a mouse look, which was also complicated. But it was really hard to try to get a camera to pan, zoom, and rotate all in one code. And I had to separate all three game objects to deal with that, and then modify it just to deal with it, because also looking at the target also causes the position of the game object to change. So it was really complicated to deal with that, and that took me for a giant setback. But in the end, I got it, and I have pretty good code here. The last setback was I had to change the way movement works in the game. And this is partly Unity's fault again, because if you've ever used Unity, the way they suggest that you move it is by directly moving the transform and the transform translate. But the problem with that is when I started to add in stats to make the character go faster, and what will happen if you just directly modify the transform with transform translate, you'll just go through game object. So I had to change all my code to work with the physics system and work on the rigid body system. I suggest that's what any game developer does, because otherwise, if you make your character move really fast or something weird happens, they'll just go straight through the wall using a transform translate system. I also had to modify the jumping to also work based on physics. So that really set me back, because I had to recode all of that using the rigid body system. I've also changed the jump because I wanted it to work with increased stats to be able to jump higher. And one thing I didn't want the player to do was jump super high if they had a super high ability to jump. So now the jump works based on how long you hold it down. The basic jump is like that. And now if you hold it down longer, based on your stats, you can jump higher and further. And if you let go in the middle, it'll just straight start dropping right there. So all that took me a long time to get down. But as you can see, I have a way smoother system. Even the jump is smoother. Feels a bit floaty, but the character no longer goes through objects. The camera system works perfectly, and it all works with my class and stat system that I programmed in the previous video. So now I can change the character stats to however high I want, and that character will just use the stats instead of going through the walls and all the goofy stuff, because I didn't program it using the physics system. Now, all these problems I don't think would have been obvious if you're just a casual user of Unity, because most people wouldn't have to deal with stuff like that. They wouldn't change the speed of their character movement so dramatically, so you wouldn't have to worry about physics like that. But the way that Unity has it set up using the translate system and not the rigid body system as an example for character movement, I think that's a pretty bad example, because it doesn't show the dangers of just modifying the transform directly and going through an object when you're trying to program something like a third-person controller or even a first-person controller. But I can see why they do it, because when you use the rigid body system, the player's expecting unrealistic movement, like something like this. When I jump with the character stops and rolls. I had to program that in, because if I didn't program the rigid body to stop all velocity when they hit the ground, the character would just slide after the jump and just keep on sliding. That's an example of expecting unrealistic physics behavior, and I believe that's why Unity tells you to use the translate system, because if you just did that jump using translate, you wouldn't have to worry about the character sliding after they land. But in realistic physics, the forward force after the character hits the ground is still going to be there, but that's not what a player is expecting when they jump. So I could see why in their examples they use the rigid body system, the translate system. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, that was my alarm. I can see why they use the translate system, but ultimately, if you're going to actually program a third-person controller, it isn't really good or a first-person controller, it isn't really good to use that translate system, and you're better off using the rigid body system, even if you have to program in the unrealistic physics yourself. So that's what's been setting me back the last couple of months, and now that I'm dealing with that and just programming for PC and a controller, I should be able to get all this done much faster, because that input issue on mobile really took me a couple of months to deal with and just to learn, and just to try to use ChatGPT to figure out how some of it works and how I could get it to work, and just some hidden features on how Unity deals with touches and touch mouse input and stuff like that. But now that I'm just going to give up on that and deal with working on the project, I can get this done a lot faster. And at the end, I'll just use a paid solution to deal with touch inputs, because I feel that's a lot easier. And it's better than dealing with Unity's built-in solution. I really think they need a better solution for that, but I don't know how they would do that. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Interested in anything I'm doing, or you just want to follow the channel, please like and subscribe, and check out my socials in the description down below.